Okay. All right, three, two, one. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is James Musker, and he's just published a book. The title is The New World Religion and the Beliefs of the Elite. I heard his name on an interview on Brandon Schwinn's Cast 'Em Off Radio, and I listened with great interest. So I asked him for an interview, and he kindly agreed. So I'm glad to have him here. James, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, James. And yeah, we're recording all the way. You're in the UK, so you know it's about a 8-hour difference. But I would suspect most of my audience probably doesn't know about you. So before we get into the chapters of the book, can you talk a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in the subject?
Yes, well, after 9/11, there were a lot of questions that need to be answered. And so I started to study conspiracy. Previous to that, I was very keen on Christianity, and I spent many years studying that to quite a high degree, I suppose. I took a degree in that, and I also went to Bible college. All of these things, though, after 9/11, led me to believe that the economic and political situation that we were going into needed to be sort of sorted out what was going on in the world today. So I spent a great deal of time researching many different facets of the New World Order, and so there we are, decided that the economic and political situation that we face today, the game is kind of over in terms of us being able to make any inroads into the what's going on politically and economically. But religion, as the third leg of the stool that Peter Drucker mentions in his three-legged stool concept, that if economics, politics and religion are all together with one leg on each of the stools, then each is compatible to the other. But the religious aspect to the rollout of the New World Order, I was very keen to study, and so I started to read everything that I could about that over the course of many years, and eventually decided to write a book about it because there was still a gaping gap there about things that people didn't know about.
Yeah, I mean, and I read the book. It's a fantastic book. So I commend you for writing that, and I think it's important because this is information you don't, at least in the States, you don't get at a public school. This is something associated with either elite circles or secret societies and things like that. So these backgrounds, I think, for getting a background understanding of this information is very important. So maybe that's how we can start, is talk about how the ideas that are going to form this New World religion. Where did they come from?
Yes, well, obviously the long-term plan for the cryptocracy, the hidden government, is to bring us into this sort of Luciferian religion. But in order for us to eventually reach that position, there are a lot of different beliefs that they need us to slowly be dragged into. And so, as usual, the cryptocracy use a number of subtle techniques and processes in order to make us become believers in their systems. So I mention in the book some of the belief systems that will make up the future New World religion, and I also talk about the beliefs of the hidden government. So there's Freemasonry, there's Hermeticism, there's obviously Luciferianism. Those are probably the main three religious beliefs that perhaps you can see. William, yourself, having studied a lot of Crowleyism and Thelema, this is perhaps an area that is also present within the cryptocracy. They are, yeah.
I would agree.
After all, yeah.
A facet of it for sure, yeah. Crowleyism.
Yes, so we can maybe look at the 9/11 numbers, which fits in exactly with Aleister Crowley's belief systems and Thelema. But also, I mentioned that the New World religion, the center of it, will be dark green religion. It's a type of very diverse belief that is along the lines of we're all connected with nature, and that it's linked in with environmentalism and the ecology, and that the future world religion will be an excuse to manage us under a sort of environmental construct, right, so that we are able to be managed in every way. So the center of the New World religion is really an earth, pagan, mother goddess religion.
Right. I think you termed it Gaian animism too, like worshiping the earth. And I mean, I think that's definitely one part of it. And you can see, I think you can tie that into kind of Al Gore's fear-based thing about global warming. You know, I think that's part of it. Like, this world is going wrong. We need to change that. But it's also, I mean, we were at least in California, we're supposed to be under an ice shelf by 2013. But I think that he's part of that. He's part of one of these new world order types who is, you know, terrifying the public to facilitate gradual change.
Absolutely. Al Gore, in his book, you have to be quite, well, not clever, but you need to be aware of these things in order to make the realization. But he is keen that mankind will enter into this utopian society by beliefs that he slightly touches upon. So he's keen to take humanity into this environmental situation where those beliefs are being formed. So he mentions the New World religion in terms of the fact that there's an evolutionary sort of paradigm, there's a shift that we will go through in order to arrive at this utopian state. And once you know that, you will see it all over the place, the concept of man reaching for the stars, or mankind entering into the utopian state via Lucifer or via knowledge. And so Al Gore, he's definitely part of that, and it is in his writings, his main book being, I mention it, yeah, I can't remember what it's called actually, but yeah.
But I mean, he's part of that. This trace goes back. It was interesting because you brought up Julian Huxley's International Union for the Conservation of Nature, and he was a huge part of UNESCO and the UN. So these notions of man governing the earth aren't unique to Al Gore, right?
Absolutely, you can see it all over the place, and so the United Nations, they are keen to promote the one world religion via the United Religious Initiative back in 1990.
Yeah, can you talk about the URI, please?
Yes, the United Religions Initiative was originally started with Gillian Sorensen back in 1993. She is a Council on Foreign Relations member, and she went up to Bishop William Swing, who was part of the Episcopal Church, not probably that far from yourself, William, in San Francisco.
Gotcha. Yeah, no.
And
that's where I grew up. I grew up in San Francisco, so I know that area.
Yeah, right. So he is based in the Mexican compound, where the United Nations is. But anyway, Julian Sorensen went to Bill Swing and said, "Look, we would like you to start in 2 years' time this United Religions Initiative," and that's what they started in 1995. It slowly rolled out. The first interfaith service was held exactly 50 years on the anniversary of the signing of the UN Charter. And this is why it's linked in with the UN. Not only is it promoted by the Council of Foreign Relations, but it's basically endorsed and funded by United Nations groups who are 100% linked in behind the agenda. So that United Religions Initiative, the concept there is that they will draw all the religions together slowly and imperceptibly, so that they can create a new type of religion. Basically, they will say, Bishop Swing, that they're not starting a new religion, But it's interesting to note that at the start he went around to all the heads of various religions. So he went off to Israel to speak to rabbis, he went off to Protestant, he came to Britain, and he went all around the world to speak to religious heads and said, look, I'm starting this United Religions initiative, come and join with me. To which they said, sorry, we don't like the sound of that. Right. And he admits that he realized that the United Religions initiative, the theory behind all the religions joining together, will really have to come from the grassroots. So he started then to go around to all the believers at the bottom, as it were, and then work his way up rather than go from the top down.
Right.
So
all the leaders, it's basically ecumenism, right? I mean, that's what they're promoting.
Yes, it is. It's interfaithism and the long-term strategy. But this is not really a view, but the long-term strategy overall is for Protestants basically to join in with Catholicism, and Catholicism and Hinduism and Buddhism to join together, and then into Islam, Christianity and Islam to form Chrislam, and then go on to form a type of earth worship, and then from there go on to form a Luciferian religion. So this is what we're slowly seeing, the greying out of religions all over the world, bringing them together. And it will really be a type of control network whereby they can keep control of the masses. You see, part of their belief is, part of what their thinking is, the elite, the cryptocracy, is that religions are causing all the world's problems, all the world's wars. It's actually them that's doing it, but they like to play that game that it's religions, and this is why we have this concept of bad and good Islam. If they're not promoting or highlighting the difference between good and bad Islam, then they can't make the Hegelian, they can't get the two conflicting sides together to form the synthesis. So on the one side, they've been promoting good Islam, Islam's a religion of peace, and trying to convert everyone to Islam. And then on the other side, they have been advancing the causes of bad Islam, typically Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all of these. Yeah. Those are funded groups. We know that.
We know that. No doubt.
Yeah. So they're funding both sides, as always, the cryptocracy, in order to make their controlled conclusion. Part of which also is to do with fundamentalism. If you're having an argument about fundamentalism, you'll always end up probably talking about Islam and how bad it is that there's ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So if they can stop people from being orthodox, I don't like the term fundamental, because, you know, if being a Christian fundamental, what does that really mean? It's not really the right term. Orthodoxy, which means that you believe the doctrines and the dogmas of the Bible, and you take it all fairly seriously. That's fine. But if they're always pushing the envelope to try to make people not be keen on their belief, and that's why another side agenda to the real main agenda of good and bad Islam. And that's why we've got Tony Blair and John Kerry, two people who we know are high up within the cryptocracy, advancing the good Islam side of it.
That's remarkable. Yeah, Kerry. Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable that Bush ran against Gore in 2000 and then Kerry 2004, both on George Bush Jr. himself. All of them part of the cryptocracy, you know.
Yes, well, they were both Skull and Bones members, and so 15 people per year. There are over 30 years. That's probably only about 450 people or something. Out of those 450 people, 2 American presidents. No conspiracy there.
No conspiracy. Just 2 Skull and Bones guys. What are they? Brothers under the skin, as they say, I think.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes. That's interesting.
Like that. Yeah. So, So you see this cryptocracy in action, and I think that the UN. You had a fascinating article just about how the UN and these individuals are shaping it in an occult manner with this Ark of Hope and the Earth Charter and its history. And here you have Maurice Strong, and these guys all use these kind of religious terms, you know, and I think that was fascinating as well in your book, the idea of a Pentecost, you know, this kind of usurping Christian terms for this Luciferian change that's going to happen. But maybe you can talk about Maurice Strong and the foundation of the United Nations.
Well, yes, Maurice Strong is an interesting character within this story. He was very high up within the United Nations for a very long time. He died a couple of years ago in China when he got caught trying to take a bribe, or he did take a bribe, and then he ended up living in China a bit disgraced. He joined up forces basically with Mikhail Gorbachev after the fall of the Soviet era, and he was a Canadian who made a lot of money through energy, and he worked within the United Nations. There's evidence that the Rockefellers spotted him, and he became really one of their sort of darlings of their cause. He was in the Aspen Institute, which is heavily linked to the Trilateral Commission, which is a major think tank, humanistic think tank on the behaviour of man. And he's been a big promoter, really, of the New World religion in terms of the setting up the Ark of Hope, which he promoted along with Stephen Rockefeller, who was given the task of sort of being at the head of carrying it from Vermont over to the United Nations building in 2002. Maurice Strong, he wrote quite a few books about, which were basically they were New Age books. He said that his sort of spiritual guru was, there are several of them. You've got Dag Hammarskjöld, and you've got Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Jesuit-trained Catholic missionary, who we can look at in a bit. But yeah, Maurice Strong, he was central to this, to the climate change hoax that we've been subjected to since about 1986. And he also helped to write the Earth Charter. The Earth Charter may seem like a bit of a non-event, but it is supposedly the prototype of the New World Order constitution. It speaks about how we should all be planetary citizens, how we should respect and prevent pollution, which is something we all want to not pollute and make sure that the earth is looked after. But the trouble is that the cryptocracy of which he was part of, they are keen to use the environmental excuse as a method of managing us. So yeah, the Earth Charter's there. It's really a method of bringing us into their technocratic Fabianist society, their Masonic society. So
and
the UN.
I mean, can you talk a little bit more in detail about the Ark of Hope, what it was, and why its importance, and kind of the occult nature of the United Nations with its meditation room and things like that?
Yes, that's great, William. The Ark of Hope was a made-up structure to look. It's like the Ark of the Covenant. You might have seen it in the films and things. So on each side of the Ark of Hope, it's like a square box which has poles going through, which are 96 inches long, and they are said to be unicorns' horns. And on each of the sides of the Ark of Hope, there is a drawing of one of the elemental forces. So you've got water, spirit, air, earth, and fire. And each one of these is said to represent a religion. They said that it was a sort of magical place, that the Ark of Hope was a sort of magical place where they could all meet, and it's a place where the New World religion basically does have a symbol, and that is the Ark of Hope. It is in the United Nations building, And
yeah, it's remarkable. And those are the 5 points of the pentagram too, is earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. Yeah, so it kind of correlates the thing. But then there's also, the UN itself is actually a monolith. And the cryptocracy loves this monolithic symbol. And so you see that there's like the monolith that was close to, and the United Nations was funded and founded on land provided by the Rockefellers, right? So
yes,
there's a very strong key of the Rockefellers through the Bushes, UN, Maurice Strong, Kissinger, all these guys, and this occultism. And 30 Rock has all kinds of occult symbolisms, the symbols that tie back to theosophy and the idea of Prometheus as the symbol of Lucifer, right? The bringer of fire to the people. So
yes,
they're super occult. And then can you talk about the meditation room in the United Nations?
Yes, it was Doug Hammarskjöld who Alice Bailey said in the 1930s. He said that there would be a disciple, and that basically was him. He was General Secretary in the UN from 1953 to 1961, and he developed the meditation room at the UN headquarters in New York. And so inside that room is a very heavy black hematite rock stone altar. It weighs about 6.5 tons, and on one side of that room there's also a painting which is in the style of Picasso, and the esoteric meaning of that painting is that there's a chink of light coming all the way through the center of the painting. It represents the emergence of Lucifer. The Lucis Trust, which was started by Alice Bailey in 1922, it was called the Lucifer Trust. You probably know that, yeah. And then they changed its name a few years later. But the Lucis Trust used to look after the rooms, those meditation rooms, which were the UN. It's incredible, really.
It's incredible. Wow.
And there was Sri Chinmoy, who was the New Age priest who used to hold twice weekly ceremonies in the room. He was invited by Uthant, one of the general secretaries. He's a Theravada Buddhist, Uthant was, and he used to hold these meetings there. But it was really New Age religion that they used to hold. So
right.
Doug Hammarskjöld started the meditation room. It's still there. You can go and see it. It's not Christian. It's not any other religion. It's New Age. It shouldn't really be there. And this is, for me, this is the real smoking gun behind all of this story about the New World religion. And that is that if the UN were secular and they were taking us into a totally secular world, well, why are they they'd be doing secular things, but why are they promoting the this extraordinary Ark of the Covenant gone wrong with the Ark of the Hope?
Right.
Why are they promoting this meditation room? And why is practically all of their general secretaries and practically all of the most important writings about them infused with New Age religion?
Yeah,
it's extraordinary.
Point. It is extraordinary. And my understanding is that black cube, represents the cube of Saturn, right? So there's an element between that as well. And Dag Hammarskjöld, he died in a mysterious plane crash in Africa, if I remember correctly. He kind of,
yes.
I don't know if that was a questionable crash. Do you know more about how he died?
No, I don't actually. No.
Because I've heard that was very suspicious. But yeah, I mean, it's the UN itself. It's really just the background and the architecture is really something else. It's incredible. Yes. And I mean, you can see this Lucis Trust is there that ties itself back to Blavatsky, right? So you're talking about Isis Unveiled and all of these occult books from the 19th century that is theosophic ideas that are influencing, this new religion. It's incredible.
That's right. Well, Robert Muller even said that Robert Muller was another UN member high up within the UN for many, many years. He was unashamedly promoted his World Core curriculum, and he said that it was based upon the writings of Alice Bailey.
Incredible.
And so, yeah, it is.
And he wrote all kinds of. He has published all kinds of different books too. He was like an Alsatian or something like one of these guys close to the German border, right? I mean, he was actually French, right?
Yes, he might have been. Yes, French or Belgium. Yeah.
The safe passage into the 21st century, the birth of a global civilizations, desire to be human, global reconnaissance of human perspectives in an age of transformation, and in honor of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. So that name pops up again.
Yes. Well, yes, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, he died in 1955, and he was a Jesuit-trained Catholic priest. He was a missionary in China. He was a very interesting chap. He was involved in the Piltdown Man hoax, probably unwitting, I think. But he wrote a book called The Phenomena of Man, which is about how man is slowly becoming back to the Godhead, back to Christ. He spoke about the coming of the cosmic Christ, and the concluding vision of his concepts were the Omega point, where in the future man has evolved to know God. The trouble was with Teilhard de Chardin, he just went a little bit too far in this concept of knowing God, and he actually said that they would become God. And of course, that little bit more there is quite a big bit more, but that took it. Yeah.
Right, it takes us back full circle back to Genesis, right? The original "You shall be as gods," which you do reference in your book.
Yes, and this concept ties in with Luciferianism, which is really a sort of religion that emerged probably in the last 200 years, although to some degree it was already around before. But it's based upon a twisted commentary of Genesis, where you have the serpent going to Eve and saying, if you eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you will become like God. And that is where it all started to go wrong. But the view that the Luciferians take is that they think that Satan and Lucifer are the same thing in their view. Well, they're the same thing to everyday people, but they're not quite the same to people who are Luciferians. But they take the view that Lucifer did mankind a favour by providing Eve with the tree so that they could know knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil.
Well, oftentimes they will take out that latter phrase. They'll take out good and evil and interpret it as the serpent providing knowledge to man. Leary used to quote that, but he would leave out, Timothy Leary, he would leave that out. One of the interesting things about, just to go back to Teilhard de Chardin, is that the intro to that book was written by Julian Huxley. So you see these, these guys are interwoven together.
Yes, I've noticed that as well. It's fascinating. Yes, it's a very good point to make.
But yeah, so maybe that's a good thing to talk about right now is Luciferianism. What are the central tenets that these people who are going to create this new religion, and one of the takeaways from your book, which is fantastic, is you can see that the push towards this new age religion pushed by the elites is going to be, I think, come from a variety of different angles. Buddhists and Jesuit priests and humanists, so they're all, Chardin is a Jesuit priest, so it's coming from different angles.
Yes, that's right, and I suppose it does run very, very deep. That's a brilliant point that you've made there, William. So the Luciferian philosophy I go into in some detail. There are two basic types. You've either got theistic, i.e. that they believe it and they believe in Lucifer as an agent, perhaps not Satan, but a helper to man is what they believe, and that by being plugged in with knowledge and Lucifer, they can overcome all the problems of man's existence and all the struggles, etc. But the other type of Luciferianism, which I think is more common, is metaphorical Luciferianism, where they take the belief in Lucifer as a metaphor. So a metaphor might be, for example, the mind is an ocean, or the city is a jungle. That just to give you a quick bit of what a metaphor is. So yeah, they believe that when Satan came to Eve, they did mankind a favor, and then so that's metaphorical Luciferianism, and there's God within you, and that you can slowly come to know God, and not only know God but become a God, and that's what part of this is all about, and that's what the higher degree Freemasonry and other secret societies are aiming towards. Right. They are aiming for you to be plugged in with Lucifer and then eventually to become a god. I mean, that's what Aleister Crowley and lots of these other high-level occultists are basically all about.
Right. That's what Crowley wrote in Liber 77. Liber Oz is, there is no God but man. So he flat out states it in a very simple axiom, you know. So yeah, he believed he had all kinds of powers, and his magic would give people power. And yeah, I mean, I think that's really one of it. Is Godhead also aligned, and that's one of the fascinating aspects, is tying that in, the Godhead, into transhumanism, how people are going to change possibly in the future, and the mark of the beast, you know, is tied into that.
Yes, well, I believe it could be. We don't know what the mark of the beast is, but it would make some more sense for it to be some sort of DNA upgrade or some sort of system whereby you could literally download your mind into a robot and live like that. We don't know, obviously, but I think it makes more sense in some ways for the mark of the beast to be along that sort of artificial intelligence line rather than simply an RFID chip, because I don't think you need RFID chips to find out where everyone is and where they're going. They've got a mobile phone. So, and in England, you've got cameras on every street corner. But
they don't work during. They only work. They work all the time, but they don't work during false flag attacks, right?
Oh, absolutely. It just happened to not be off that day. I mean, can you believe these people? Yeah. I mean, we had this classic one with Westminster Bridge. All the cameras weren't working on the day. Not only has our £5 note got Westminster Bridge on it, it's also got a picture of Churchill. And Churchill looked pretty similar to Aleister Crowley. So there he is on the £5 note in England. It's outrageous.
And you actually talk about false flag terror as kind of one of the tools in the black bag of the New World Order. You know, how to, you know, the war on terror and all this stuff is pushing people towards an end.
Yes, I'm pretty keen on hoaxes, because if you don't understand and know about hoaxes, then you may well be deceived, and therefore I think it's important to know of that. I do also make the point that we cannot be 100% certain that what is a hoax really is a hoax, which makes the whole subject just extraordinary. But there are pointers to what is a hoax, and as I mentioned quite strongly about how there are very many different stories. Muddying up the waters is one of their systems, and that there are possibly 3 basic stories or more to any. I mean, Sandy Hook or 9/11 or 7/7, just examples of these kind of hoaxes, that there are many different levels at which they're promoted by the mainstream media. But it's very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult.
You talked about those hoaxes after a chapter about social engineering, so I think you tie those, you know, these events together towards, you know, these hoaxes being created to have a certain end, you know, a certain intent. Whether it's the creation of the war on terror after 9/11 or, you know, 7/7. I mean, it's amazing that these are both high occult numbers. 7/7 there in London was, you know, right there. I was just talking about Liber Oz, Liber 77. And same as the flowing of the flights on 9/11. So I do believe that these elites and their religion are using this numerology, you know, no question.
Yes, it is true. And I noticed that in your book you mentioned the 12th of October date, which is Aleister Crowley's birthday, and there are 3 of them actually. There's the Brighton bombing with Margaret Thatcher and Norman Tebbit, and then there are the 2 others that you mentioned in your book, which were the Bali bombing, and the other one was the USS Cole.
Right.
So there are 3 of them.
Oh yeah, I mean it's incredible. All these sophisticated false flag terror attacks were on important numerological dates, as if they were planned for those dates.
And I know that may sound absolutely bad, but they've been doing this for hundreds of years. It's part of their system. Where's the fun? Not fun, but where's the, what's the point of doing some event if no one knows about it? Of course you want one or two people within your network to know about it.
Right.
So they've been using these ciphers and symbols and gematria to numerology to do that for many centuries, and so they're not stopping now.
No. I mean, it's always been happening. I think Salvador Allende was overthrown on September 11th, 71. Kissinger was very involved in that. I can't remember the exact year that Allende was overthrown. And then I believe, I can't have it proved, but I believe the groundbreaking for the Pentagon was 9/11, 1941. So,
yes.
These are going back. Yeah, I wonder how much farther back in history you can see these dates, important things happening on these dates, structured events.
Yes, it's something I'm looking at, and I'm so busy. I'm trying to write something else at the moment, so it's just something on the back burner a bit. But
well, they kind of come together. If you once your mind knows that these events are happening, things fall into place. Like, oh, I learned about Allende reading something totally different. I said, hey, is that September 11th? Oh, there's another September 11th. That was an important event, installing Pinochet and basically destroyed that whole socialist plan of Allende, and just
right.
There's secret death camps and death squads, and horrible event in Chile. So,
right, yeah.
Let's see. What else do you think is a good thing to cover? We're at about 36 minutes. I usually go about 50.
Yeah. I think 9/11, it's important to, and I hope that this isn't too divisive a thing to bring up, but I just want to mention about the no planes thing on 9/11, because you can never really break free from the sort of occult mind control technique or deep psychology of 9/11 until you understand what really did happen that day. And so I put in my book that there weren't any planes on that day going into any buildings, and that all of them were hoaxes, and that the so-called eyewitness accounts, all of them. I wasn't there, by the way, so I've had this debate with a friend of mine. Okay. But all of these eyewitness accounts are false, and the picture of the plane going into the South Tower is just simply the deletion of the pixels as it goes in. It's absolutely impossible for a plane to penetrate any building. So I think it's important to try to reach our own conclusions on that very big issue. But just wanted to.
Yeah, I mean that's the Pentagon, for example. They don't have any wreckage of the plane, and there was the guy. I don't know if you're familiar with this. I don't remember seeing it in the book, but the Harley man who was talking to Fox News. Do you ever see that guy? He had a Harley T-shirt, but he was right there at the front and had the storyline down to a T. I saw a plane hit the tower. I mean, it was incredible. He's obviously a plant. He was obviously a plant. They walked up to him totally. I mean, it's part of the fake news.
Right.
Saw the plane hit the tower, then it collapsed on itself. It must have collapsed on itself, and he had the strike. And there's all kinds of foreshadowing to 9/11 in modern culture. If you keep an eye out for it, it's really there. I mean, I am working on something that I think a lot of people will be very surprised at all the hints at the event. Like, people knew that date. So, it's like what you're talking about. Like, this is the strike. And those numbers are also markers for people to know what the agenda is. If the insiders all know, okay, this is what happened. But yeah. And that, that event also, it's very important to understand that these are traumatizing events. They're meant to be traumatizing to the population, because I can't say I'm a psychologist, but once people are in a traumatic state, they're suggestible. So the trauma and then the suggestion. So you traumatize people, a lot of people are dead, buildings are exploded, and then you go, Osama bin Laden, Iraq, and they just go, yeah, let's go. And they're kind of semi-hypnotized, if not fully hypnotized. I don't know. But I myself, I wish I could say that I knew right away that 9/11 was an inside job. I didn't. So, I mean, I was one of them. Yeah, Bin Laden. Yeah, I mean, I was right there with the whole team. So it's
Don't worry. We're going to be so much more wise if they try and do that sort of thing again. Yeah. It's
and they're all wise now. I mean, there's some of these events are not sticking. Some of these school shootings and
yes.
I mean, there's elements within the government that can create these very elaborate theatrical events, and false flag. Some of these are false flags. So 9/11 is one.
Yes. It's a bit like going to a magic show and someone does a card trick right in front of you, and you're ready to be duped. You're quite enjoying waiting to be duped because it's entertainment. Right. And then, lo and behold, the card just becomes it's right behind your ear, Right. And of course, they can't do that on a political, or the services, they can't do that. They're not. You see what I'm saying? I'm being a bit sarcastic to make my point. Yeah. That it's all an illusion. A lot of the stuff that is going on today is an illusion, and we need to be a lot more wised up to it.
I agree.
And I kind of mention in the book that one of the ways in which they can take us into their new kingdom and their managed society with a religion that's totally greyed out, eventually they're going to have to sort of collapse the economic system, or to bring us into Agenda 21. And I also mention about the fake alien invasion, that this is probably one of their best ways in which to get mankind all on the same sort of sheet, pulling in the same direction, and for to give up their sovereignty and their bombs and all be joined together.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up, because that in more kind of these kind of alternate media circles, there's a lot of ufology as a study, and people talking about these extra dimensional or terrestrial people, and there's enough credulous people to believe it's happened. What was the story? There was the book. Oh God, I can't remember.
H.G. Wells. He wrote a book, The War of the Worlds, didn't he? And I live not that far from Woking, and in England, in Woking, there are some War of the World tripod alien statues. Believe it or not, amazingly. So
there was another one that I'm trying to remember. It was by the guy who wrote 2001.
Arthur C. Clarke.
Arthur C. Clarke wrote a book about an alien invasion that changed the world, and it kind of transformed everything. And man gets basically changed and then uploaded into something else. It's pretty remarkable. That was another one. I can't remember the title of that.
Yes. Yes, Arthur C. Clarke. He's very much sort of on the fringe of this subject, but he is, he was a cryptocracy member himself, so
Absolutely.
He knew.
He and Kubrick. 2001. There's ties in between 2001, the cryptocracy, and 9/11. This whole monolith, the monolithic buildings. There's a deep, very deep, thing. I think the book I was talking is The Sentinel, I think is what it was. No, I can't remember which book.
Right.
By Clarke. Anyway. But yeah, he's part of the cryptography, and a pedophile. Basically moved to Sri Lanka so that, he could find victims. That was one of the reasons why he had moved there. And
yes.
Kubrick himself, there are stories about Kubrick that I'm reading that are horrifying. So Arthur C. Clarke and him are Childhood's End. That was it. That's the book I was trying to remember. So yeah, so these guys, Clarke, Kubrick, 9/11. It's hard for people to believe, but those are things that you can tie those together.
Yes, and so it's very much, everything does kind of link in the more you look at it, and it's not because the cryptocracy, they're very keen to link things in, and if they can, they will. And their religion it's mentioned in the Bible with the 666 number, the numerology, because Christianity doesn't really have numerology in it. There are references to 12 baskets representing 12 tribes and this sort of thing. But so the cryptocracy are into numerology, and but the precise situation of their religion we don't know. But I think the Thelemic link is quite interesting. Aleister Crowley link. It seems to be there because that's your subject.
Well, I just knew that's how I kind of got into Crowley was through 9/11 because the 93s I kept seeing all over the place, and then I realized Thelema and Agape were Thelemic is Thelema, which is a 93 in Gematria. So that's how I got started going. That Crowley was through 9/11. So that was it. I mean, that 77 was a huge number, and 175 is there's a common way in the worship of Lucifer is the God you adore. If you're supposed to adore Satan or Lucifer, and 175 is that, which God you can adore your God. So that's the meaning, I believe, of Flight 175. So all those numbers of those things come together, and the buildings themselves are a huge 11. They're both representatives of things in magic, which are opposites and fusing opposites together. So you can kind of see that, and you put that in your book, right? So the two buildings become one.
The two buildings becoming one, which is part of Hegel's dialect, but also Hegel apparently got that from the Kabbalist Isaac Luria.
Wow.
That's where it originally comes from.
I didn't know that. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So it's a magical phrase or axioms, I guess. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that you got that. Wow.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end. Why don't you tell people where they can get in touch with you, where they can buy your book and your website?
Yes, well, I'm on Facebook at Regeneration, and the best way to find me is to type in the search New World Rel, R-E-L being short for religion, obviously. And I'm on Twitter at New World Rel as well. So the book is on.
Yeah, you said The Regeneration, right? The Regeneration.
Yes, The Regeneration, which is a reference to Matthew, that in the book of Matthew, in the Bible, when all things are sort of before the new heaven and the new earth, there will be the millennial rule of Christ. And so on the front cover of the book, we've got the nasty Illuminati triangle, but behind that we've got the new heaven and the new earth with the new Jerusalem coming down. It's not the new heaven and the new earth, it's the new Jerusalem, and that is a reference to the regeneration, and it's a term that Jesus used. It's actually similar in the Aramaic to the first word of the Bible, Bereshith. Anyway, it's all linked.
That's great. No, that's a great reference. So the Regeneration, that's on Facebook, and then how can they find your book?
Yes, the book is on Amazon, and it's on Amazon.com. If you put the New World Religion James Musker, it will come up, and it's $12.49 for the paperback, and for the Kindle, it's only $5.51. So I've tried to keep it as cheap as possible so that people can read it, because I'm very keen that people should know this information, because it really is very, very important to have some understanding of this, particularly as we enter into what Christians call the end times, which is the belief that the culmination of history is slowly approaching, and it could happen at any time that this extraordinary change that we're going through actually does happen. And so
excellent. I hope people read it too. It's an excellent book. You've put a lot of different pieces together into a book that's really fantastic. So I commend you for writing it. Again, the title is The New World Religion and the Beliefs of the Elite by James Musker, Musker. And any final words?
Well, thank you very much for having me, William Ramsey, and also the Ed Opperman show. Thank you very much, and just keep the faith, everyone. Don't get into Aleister Crowley, because that's just a rabbit warren to hell. I'll tell you, it's I've been looking at that as well. I have to pray a lot that it's not going to have any effect on me, because it's pretty hardcore stuff. That guy, I just don't go there.
Well, I called him the prophet of evil, so I tried to make it very clear. He thought he was the prophet of a new age, but his ideas were definitely evil and malevolent and pestilential to any person who gets in contact with them. So I definitely agree with you there. Again, James Musker, thank you very much.
Thank you.